I think as far back as Thanksgiving, I had decided that I was going to make 3 walnut trays for 3 specific people as gifts. Now I did a bunch of research online, and I could have easily bought a walnut tray for less than I spent on materials, I think. Although, I'm not sure I always trust a lot of the online places when they claim that their products are built with certain species of wood, and then there is the quality and the finish that's used. So many questions about their products, and let's be honest here, there's nothing like giving a handmade gift to somebody. In all seriousness, I was never going to buy these. I used the research as a guide for dimensions and designs, although I knew I wanted to keep the design simple. I am aware I'm starting to sound like a broken record here, but the planer saga is not over. I'm still without it. Not a problem though, there are workarounds. In this case, my workaround means having to purchase lumber that's been surfaced on all 4 sides. Which means when I bought it, somebody has already planed all 4 surfaces and made sure they're all square. That doesn't necessarily mean that the boards that I purchased were totally straight, and because it's real wood, it tends to bend and twist depending on how thick or thin it's been cut, and the moisture content, and the species, etc, etc. So it still needs some work to be done. I started off with this 1/4 inch piece of walnut that I jointed on my new jointer, and then glued together. Because it was so thin, I had to use blue painter's tape as clamps, which worked remarkably well. And the cold in the garage meant that I couldn't keep it downstairs for the glue to set up. So I took it upstairs into the living room and left it there overnight to cure. I also placed the 3 tray bases in between sheets of plywood, slapped a couple of weights on them to make sure that they didn't bow or cup as they were drying. I then rough cut the sides and the ends. As I've never made a tray, I'm not always sure which order is the best to do things, and with these trays I was running on a bit of a tight schedule. I picked up the lumber 3 days before we had to leave on a little road trip down to California, so essentially had 2 evenings after work to work on these and get them finished. I marked out where I wanted to put the handles, and I used a center punch to mark where I would use a 1-inch Forstner bit and cut the ends of the handles out. After I've used the Forstner bit to drill either end of the handle, I then come back with the jigsaw and try and stay as close to the mark lines as I can, and cut out the rest of the handle. I'll come back and clean this up with a chisel if I need to, and of course, everyone's favourite, sandpaper. Some of these shots might be a little out of order because I've already routed the dados here. But anyway, I shape these handles using the jigsaw. I then take them over to the Spindle Sander. I have this small oscillating spindle sander that I got for making anything curved, but really the main reason I got it was for the charcuterie boards. It will see more and more use, I'm sure. Although I have this problem when I'm using it, that if I apply too much pressure, maybe this is just user error, which I'm sure it is, sometimes the sandpaper creeps up, and then I have to hold the piece of wood in the air and apply a little bit of downward pressure, and then the sandpaper will go down. Not ideal. I'll find a solution at some point, I'm certain. And again, I'm 100% sure that I'm doing something wrong. But either way, it was a little annoying. I brought the tray bases down from upstairs after the glue had completely set, and I peeled off the makeshift tape clamps. And as you can see, they held up super well. Now, all that's left to do for these is to give them a sand. And when I'm sanding, I will also add a little chamfer to the edge so that it sits into that dado that I routed, which you can clearly already see. Anyway, here's the actual footage of me routing the dados. I did some of this probably not in the best order, but I wasn't entirely sure in what order to do some of the things, and then you add in trying to catch it on camera and editing, and sometimes things end up in a little jumbled and out of order. So here we are. I did 2 of these at the same time using a little jig that I set up on my workbench with the dog holes and a couple of stops, and it ended up working out really well. I repeated this revolutionary technique with the side pieces. And finally, the shot everyone has been waiting for, a pleasing shot of me vacuuming up all the chippings. Sometimes my vacuuming skills astonish me. I'm pretty much a professional these days. Next, I whipped out my good friend, the track saw, and I used it to bring the tray bases down to the final size. All of these trays slightly differ in size because I wanted to make them as large as I could with the timber that I brought, and 2 of them ended up being, a fairly standard tray size, at least according to my research on Google and Amazon, and then one was slightly larger, and the larger one was a cookie tray gift for a very close family friend. So I was happy that one was a little larger. Over to the miter saw to cut the corner of the trays. This is probably not the best way to do it, but it's the only way that I could figure it out without having to keep readjusting the saw and making sure that it's correct at 45 degrees. So I flipped the piece upside down and then flipped it right side up to get the opposing corner. And I did this on all 6 ends and all 6 sides. Yeah, right? For 3, something like that. I then assembled the trays using waterproof wood adhesive that is food safe. I didn't glue the base into the dado so that it could expand. I'm expecting a little bit of expansion and contraction. I used a little bit of that trusty painter's tape to make sure that the miters were nice and tight and stayed in place while I readied some of the clamps. I suppose the one thing with the garage being super cold is that the glue takes a little bit longer to set up, so I've got a little bit longer to do my clamp ups. And this is essentially how I clamp things up, with pretty even pressure from both ends on both sides. Then I took the trays upstairs overnight into the living room, and that's where they stayed so that the glue would go off. I then went over everything with the orbital sander at 80, 120 and 150 grits to make sure that everything was nice and smooth. I gave it a clean with some mineral spirits and then took it upstairs to apply finish. I found Rubio Monocoat doesn't love it downstairs in the cold, and I'm sure that's part of their instructions. So, unfortunately, this evening the house is going to smell of Rubio, which I personally love. But the smell is not for everybody, and in this household, apparently, I'm the only one that's a fan. And while driving down to California, the trays were in the back of the truck and it became a little overpowering, so we had to stop and grab a waterproof Tupperware container to put them in. And they sat in the back of the truck in the bed. Anyway, I digress. I mix up some of the good old Rubio Monocoat with the accelerator. Apply liberally and start spreading it around with a white Scotch-Brite applicator pad. That, believe it or not, is the technical term. I apologize here, but I honestly thought there was better light upstairs while I was doing this, but apparently not. And so, here we are, super grainy picture. I also forgot to take videos of the finished trays, but I did take a photo. So I guess all that's left to do is to look at these bad boys. These came out great and were awesome gifts, and definitely worth the time and effort put into them. If you're able to make something for friends and family, it's a pretty cool thing to do. Until next time, peace.